Born from the crack, a tale of creation, destruction, and infinite beginnings. The world was born from a crack. An unseen force shattered the primordial silence, and from this fissure in the void, rivers of light poured forth, sculpting the contours of a new existence. The sky, a fragile membrane, quivered above the black abyss, like a child who had yet to learn how to breathe. Beneath it, the earth pulsed like the skin of an ancient beast, stirring after millennia of slumber. Each grain of sand on its surface seemed like a drop of time, encased in a cocoon of forgotten thoughts. This place, nameless and immortal, drew those seeking salvation. People arrived, their dreams eroded by despair, like wanderers stumbling upon a mysterious oasis in an endless desert. Each left footprints that sank into the soft soil, traces of hope and fear intertwined. But none of them knew that the ground here was alive, and every step added a new rhythm to its dance, a dance swaying between existence and oblivion. Among those who came was a woman. She could not remember her name, as though it had been washed away by the waves of dreams that never materialized. In her hands she held a box, etched with intricate symbols glowing faintly with a golden hue. This artifact was her sole tether to a past that she felt must have mattered once. The box was cold to the touch, yet it radiated a peculiar warmth that made her grip it tighter whenever fear crept closer. The land beneath her feet felt alien, and yet it bore the familiarity of a scene from an old film, half forgotten but deeply ingrained. Mountains loomed in the distance like sentinels frozen in eternal vigilance, while a river snaked between them, resembling a serpent lost in a profound slumber. The air was heavy, not with weight, but with the palpable anticipation of something unseen, as if the world itself held its breath. The woman moved forward, her footsteps muffled by the yielding ground. The box seemed to hum softly in her hands, a sound that wasn't quite audible, but pressed against the edges of her mind. She felt its pull, an invisible thread guiding her through the landscape. Around her, shadows lengthened and merged with the light, creating patterns that seemed deliberate, almost like words written in a language too ancient to decipher. She reached a clearing where the ground seemed to breathe, rising and falling in slow, deliberate waves. At the center stood a tree, unlike any she had seen before. Its trunk was gnarled and silver, twisting upward into a canopy of leaves that shimmered like molten glass. The roots dug deep into the breathing earth, intertwining with the pulse of the land. It was alive in a way that transcended mere biology, a presence that emanated both wisdom and sorrow. The box in her hands grew warmer as she approached the tree. Her steps faltered, not from fear, but from the weight of an inexplicable certainty that this was the place she had been seeking. She knelt at the base of the tree, placing the box on the ground. It seemed to vibrate slightly, as though eager to reunite with something it had lost long ago. The symbols on its surface glowed brighter, casting a golden light that danced across her face and the surrounding ground. The earth trembled, softly at first, then with a growing intensity. The roots of the tree shifted, revealing a hollow beneath them. It was not a cavern, but a void, an absence so profound it seemed to consume light itself. The woman felt no fear, only a deep, aching pull toward the emptiness. She reached for the box, which now emitted a low, resonant hum that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. She opened it. Inside there was no treasure, no relic, only a mirror. Its surface was smooth and dark, reflecting nothing of the world around it. Yet as she gazed into it, shapes began to emerge. Not images of her own face, but memories, fragments of lives she had never lived, worlds she had never seen. They unfolded like pages in a book, each one more vivid and haunting than the last. A city of spires made of crystal, bathed in perpetual twilight. A forest where the trees whispered secrets in voices too soft to understand. An ocean that stretched endlessly, its waves singing in tones that could shatter the soul. The memories poured into her, filling the void within her mind. She understood now that she was not one, but many. Not a single thread, but a tapestry woven from countless strands. The box had been her anchor, but the mirror was her truth. It showed her the vastness of her existence, the boundless expanse of what she had been, and what she could become. The tree above her shuddered, its leaves falling like shards of glass, dissolving into light before they touched the ground. The void beneath it began to expand, reaching out to engulf her. She did not resist. The box fell from her hands and was swallowed by the darkness, its task complete. And then there was silence. The crack from which the world had been born began to close, and with it the woman faded. She was no longer a separate being, but a part of the pulse of the earth, the breath of the sky, the hum of the stars. The fissure sealed itself, and the landscape returned to stillness, bearing no trace of what had transpired. Yet the tree remained, its roots deep and unyielding, its branches reaching for a sky that no longer trembled. At its base, a single grain of sand glowed faintly, a tiny ember of light in the vastness of the void. A reminder that every ending is but the seed of a beginning. The ember of light pulsed faintly, a steady rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. It lay undisturbed for what could have been an eternity, nestled in the roots of the ageless tree. Seasons came and went, though they left no mark on this place. Time flowed differently here, if it flowed at all. The ember's glow began to grow, imperceptibly at first until it became a beacon in the darkness. It seemed to draw the world's attention, the way a single star might hold sway over the void. The ground quivered in response as if the earth itself remembered something long forgotten. Cracks formed in the soil, delicate and spider-web-like, radiating outward from the tree. The fissures carried whispers, faint and indecipherable, yet filled with an ancient longing. From deep within the cracks, something began to emerge. At first it was only a shimmer, like heat waves rising from sun-baked stone. Then the shimmer solidified, coalescing into tiny specks of light that danced and swirled. They moved with purpose, spiraling upward toward the tree's canopy. The tree in turn began to stir. Its branches swayed, though no wind touched them, and its silver bark shone with a brilliance that rivaled the sun. The ember was no longer alone. The specks of light gathered around it, weaving themselves into intricate patterns. They formed shapes, symbols that pulsed with an energy both alien and familiar. The air grew heavy with their presence, thick with the weight of creation. The tree seemed to respond, its roots lifting slightly from the ground, as if straining to reach for something unseen. Then, with a sound like the breaking of 1,000 waves, the ember exploded. It was not a violent act but a transformation. The light expanded, filling every crevice, every shadow, erasing the void and replacing it with a brilliance that was almost unbearable. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, and then the light began to take shape. A figure emerged from the radiance. It was neither man nor woman, neither young nor old. Its form shifted constantly, a kaleidoscope of possibilities. It moved with the grace of flowing water, each step sending ripples through the fabric of reality. Where it walked, the ground sprouted life. Flowers with petals of pure light, grasses that shimmered like silver threads, and streams of liquid crystal that carved new paths through the landscape. The figure approached the tree, and the tree bent toward it as if in reverence. The two seemed to communicate without words, their connection deeper than language. The symbols that had once adorned the box now glimmered on the figure's skin, a living testament to the countless lives and memories it carried. As the figure touched the tree, the earth trembled again. This time, the tremor was not one of destruction, but of renewal. The roots of the tree sank deeper, intertwining with the veins of the land. The branches stretched higher, piercing the sky, their tips igniting with flames that did not burn. The void that had once threatened to consume everything was no more. In its place was a new kind of emptiness, not a void, but a canvas. The figure turned its gaze to the horizon. Where there had once been desolation, there was now potential. The mountains no longer loomed as silent sentinels. They shimmered with a faint glow, as though waking from their long vigil. The river that had seemed like a sleeping serpent now sparkled, its waters singing a melody that carried on the wind. The figure raised its hands, and the symbols on its skin began to flow like liquid, cascading into the air and forming shapes that danced above it. Each shape was a fragment of something greater, a star, a city, a forest, an ocean. They hovered in the air for a moment before descending, merging with the land and sky, becoming part of the new world. The tree stood as the anchor of this creation, its roots binding the past to the present, its branches stretching toward the infinite possibilities of the future. The figure knelt at its base, placing its hands on the soil. For a moment it seemed to dissolve, its form blending with the light and the earth until it was indistinguishable from them. The cycle was complete. The land was no longer empty but alive with the hum of existence. Creatures began to stir in the shadows, drawn to the new energy that pulsed through the ground. Birds with wings of fire soared above the treetops, their cries echoing like songs of triumph. Beasts with silver hides and luminous eyes roamed the plains, their movements graceful and deliberate. And at the heart of it all stood the tree, its roots cradling the glowing grain of sand, a tiny spark that had once been the only light in the void. It remained a silent reminder of the crack from which everything had been born, and of the figure who had returned to the earth, becoming one with its rhythm. The world breathed, its pulse steady and strong. The story of its creation was etched into every leaf, every stone, every drop of water. And though no one remained who could tell the tale, the land itself remembered. It carried the echoes of what had been and the promise of what was yet to come. And somewhere, in the stillness of the eternal sky, a new crack began to form. The crack in the eternal sky spread like a hairline fracture in glass, subtle yet inevitable. It gleamed faintly, a reminder that even the most perfect creations carry within them the seed of change. From the fissure, a single droplet of light fell, spiraling downward like a comet. It pierced the canopy of the great tree, striking its core with a sound that reverberated through the land like a tolling bell. The tree shuddered, its silver bark cracking, and for a moment the entire world seemed to pause. The creatures that had been born of its energy halted in their movements. The rivers stilled, the winds silenced. The land, alive and brimming with potential, waited. From the core of the tree, where the droplet of light had landed, a new form began to emerge. This time, it was not a figure, but a sphere, a perfect, radiant orb that pulsed with a light far brighter than the ember that had sparked this world. The orb floated upward, breaking free from the tree's grasp and rising into the sky. As it ascended, its light spread outward, illuminating every corner of the land. Shadows dissolved, and the void that had lingered at the edges of creation was banished entirely. The orb reached the crack in the sky and hovered there, its light spilling through the fissure. Slowly it began to expand, merging with the fracture itself. The sky, once a fragile membrane, grew whole and strong, infused with the orb's radiant energy. The crack disappeared, but its memory remained etched in the land below. The tree, now diminished, stood in solemn silence. Its branches no longer reached for the heavens, and its leaves, once shimmering like molten glass, began to fall, dissolving into the soil. Yet it was not a death, it was a passing of the torch. The tree had served its purpose as the heart of creation, and now it became part of the land it had nurtured. The creatures stirred once more, their movements tentative at first, then bolder. They seemed to understand that they were no longer bound to the tree's rhythm, that they were free to create their own paths. The rivers began to flow again, carving new courses through the earth, and the winds carried the songs of the birds to the farthest reaches of the land. The world was alive, not as a single unified being, but as a tapestry of countless lives and stories. It was no longer perfect, but it was complete in its imperfection, a place where chaos and order danced together, each giving meaning to the other. High above, the orb continued to glow, its light now steady and warm. It was a sun, but also a reminder, a symbol of the cycle that had brought the world into being. It carried within it the echoes of the figure who had merged with the land, the whispers of the tree, and the spark of the ember that had defied the void. And so the world turned, each day bringing new beginnings and endings. The creatures built and destroyed, learned and forgot, loved and lost. They became the keepers of their own destinies, their lives woven into the ever-expanding story of existence. Yet far beyond the horizon, where the light of the orb barely reached, another crack began to form. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it carried with it the promise of another story. For the cycle of creation never truly ends. It merely begins anew, each crack in the void a doorway to infinite possibilities. And so it was, and so it would always be. The world born from a crack, living in the light, and waiting for the next fracture to set the stars into motion once more.